A merchant in ancient Iraq once held a small stone seal in his palm. It was carved with strange symbols, symbols he could not read, symbols that had traveled over 1,000 miles to reach him. He trusted it anyway. He used it to seal a trade, to guarantee a shipment, to close a deal. He never knew what it said. 4,000 years later, neither do we. Somewhere between the Arabian Sea and the foothills of the Himalayas, an entire civilization built cities with drainage systems more advanced than ancient Rome's, standardized weights precise enough to regulate trade across 1,000 miles, and a writing system used on thousands of objects: seals, tablets, pottery, ivory. And then it vanished. Its cities emptied, its people scattered, and its language went silent. For over 100 years, the finest cryptographers, linguists, and now artificial intelligence systems on Earth have tried to break that silence. Every single one has failed. This is the story of the Indus Valley Civilization, a society so advanced it should be as famous as Egypt, and so mysterious it remains one of the last great question marks in human history. By the end of this film, you will understand why. But first, you need to understand what was found buried beneath a railway line in 1856, and why it took 70 years for anyone to realize what had been destroyed. In the mid-1800s, British engineers were laying railway tracks through the Punjab region of colonial India. They needed gravel. Nearby, ancient bricks lay scattered across a mound near a village called Harappa. Uniform, well-fired, oddly perfect. The engineers didn't ask questions. They crushed them by the thousands and used them as ballast for the tracks. No one realized they were destroying the remains of one of the oldest cities on Earth. It would take until the 1920s for archaeologists to return, and when they did, what they uncovered didn't just surprise them. It unsettled the entire field of ancient history. These were not primitive villages. These were planned cities, laid out on a precise grid, with covered drains running beneath nearly every street. Public wells, grain storehouses, private bathrooms in ordinary homes, a luxury unheard of anywhere else in the ancient world at that time. The city of Mohenjo-Daro alone may have supported tens of thousands of people, all living within a system of urban planning that wouldn't be matched in the region for another 2,000 years. But here is where the story turns strange. This civilization was enormous, larger in territory than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, spread across more than 1,000 sites, home to perhaps over 1 million people at its height. And yet, before its rediscovery, the world had completely forgotten it existed. No ancient text mentioned it by name. No king list recorded its rulers. No epic poem sang of its wars, its gods, or its fall. A civilization vast enough to rival Egypt had slipped entirely out of human memory, as if someone had reached into the historical record and quietly erased it. Except for one clue, one thing the Harappans left behind in staggering quantity, scattered across their ruins like a message waiting to be opened. Writing. Small stone seals, barely the size of a postage stamp, began turning up by the hundreds, then the thousands. Each one carved with the image of an animal, a bull, an elephant, a mysterious unicorn-like creature that appears nowhere else in the archaeological record. And above the animal, a short line of symbols. Here was undeniable proof. This was a literate society. A society that valued writing enough to press it into stone, clay, copper, and ivory over and over across a territory larger than most modern countries. So archaeologists did what came naturally. They tried to read it. And that is where the story should have ended. With translation, with names, with a window into the minds of the people who built these cities. Instead, it became one of the longest-running failures in the history of archaeology. Because here is the problem no one saw coming. Every other ancient script that has ever been deciphered had one thing in common: a key, a bridge between the unknown and the known. When Jean-François Champollion cracked Egyptian hieroglyphs in the 1820s, he had the Rosetta Stone, a single inscription written in 3 scripts, one of which, Greek, scholars could already read. The same message, repeated in a known language, unlocked the unknown one. Cuneiform fell the same way, decoded using a trilingual inscription carved by a Persian king into the face of a cliff. The Indus script has no Rosetta Stone. No bilingual inscription has ever been found, not one, in over a century of digging. No later civilization claimed descent from these people and preserved the memory of how to read their writing. The thread was cut. And it was cut a very long time ago. But the deeper problem is even stranger, and it strikes at the very foundation of the mystery. Nobody is entirely certain the Indus symbols are writing at all. The inscriptions are almost impossibly short, on average just 5 symbols. The longest ever discovered, out of thousands of examples, contains only 17. Compare that to Egypt or Mesopotamia, where inscriptions stretch to hundreds, even thousands of symbols, recording hymns, wars, and royal decrees. The Indus script offers nothing like this. No long text has ever surfaced, not a single one. And that absence has split the archaeological world in two. In 2004, a team of researchers made a claim that shook the field, that the Indus symbols weren't language at all, not sentences, not words. They argued the marks functioned more like emblems, religious or political symbols, similar to a coat of arms or a guild mark, communicating identity and status without ever encoding spoken language. The counterattack came fast, and it came armed with mathematics. In 2009, a team of scientists ran the Indus symbol sequences through statistical models, comparing their structural patterns against known languages, Sanskrit, Sumerian, Old Tamil, and against clearly non-linguistic systems, including DNA sequences and artificial computer code. Published in the journal Science, the results leaned strongly toward one conclusion. The patterns in the Indus symbols behaved far more like genuine language than random signs ever could. The debate reignited instantly, and more than 15 years later, it still hasn't been resolved. Some of the most respected scholars alive remain divided on the most basic question imaginable. Is this even a language? To understand why that question matters so much, you have to walk the streets these people actually built. Picture Mohenjo-Daro at its height, somewhere around 2500 BCE. Streets run in straight lines, north to south, east to west, wide enough for carts, engineered with a precision that feels almost modern. Beneath your feet, a hidden network of drains carries wastewater silently away from every home, a sanitation system so advanced that nothing like it would appear again in this region for 2,000 years. At the western edge of the city rises a massive brick platform. At its center, a sunken pool nearly 40 feet long, sealed with waterproof bitumen, fed by carefully engineered channels. Archaeologists call it the Great Bath. What happened there? A ceremony, a ritual, a rite of purification? No one knows. No inscription survives to explain it. But something is missing from this city. Something that should be here and isn't. There is no palace, no royal tomb, no throne room.
No towering statue of a king gazing down over his subjects, the way pharaohs and Mesopotamian rulers demanded to be remembered. In a civilization this vast, this organized, this wealthy, where is the king? Some researchers now believe there wasn't one, that Harappan society may have functioned without a single all-powerful ruler at all, governed instead by councils of merchants, priests, or civic leaders, coordinating an empire-sized network of cities without ever needing to carve one man's name into stone. If true, it would make the Indus Valley radically unlike anything else in the ancient world. But it also makes the silence of their writing almost unbearable. In Egypt, we know the pharaohs' names because they wanted to be remembered. They carved their names onto every wall they could reach. In Mesopotamia, kings boasted of conquests and building projects in exhaustive detail. The Harappans had the same tool, the same script, the same stone and clay. And they said almost nothing. If they had kings, we don't know their names. If they had gods, we don't know what they were called. If they told stories around fires, the way every human culture has, not one sentence of them has survived. Whatever meaning was locked into those short strings of symbols disappeared the moment the last person who understood them died, and no one marked that as the moment it happened. The Harappans were not isolated behind their rivers. They were connected to the wider ancient world in ways that still surprise historians today. Indus seals, the very same objects carrying their untranslatable script, have been found over 1,000 miles away in the ruins of the Mesopotamian city of Ur. Sumerian texts from around 2000 BCE even mention a distant trading partner they called Meluha, a land many scholars believe was the Indus Valley itself, a source of exotic goods, carnelian beads, ivory, fine timber. Think about what that means.
A Mesopotamian trader 4,000 years ago held an Indus seal in his hand, the same object type covered in symbols no modern scholar has ever cracked, and used it anyway, trusting a message he could not read, sealing a deal across a language he did not speak. Two great civilizations, separated by deserts and mountains, doing business through a script that traveled the distance perfectly, and yet somehow its meaning never made the journey with it. And this wasn't a loosely connected patchwork of villages guessing at cooperation. The Harappans standardized their weights using a strict mathematical ratio system, the same system found at sites hundreds of miles apart. Their bricks, whether excavated in Harappa or in a city 400 miles away, follow nearly identical proportions. This was a coordinated civilization, operating under shared rules, shared systems, and almost certainly a shared script used to enforce them. which makes the silence even harder to accept.
A society organized enough to standardize trade across 1,000 miles surely used writing constantly, for accounting, for contracts, for ownership. Somewhere in those 4,000 short inscriptions is the administrative memory of an empire. We just can't open it. It's tempting to treat an undeciphered script as a puzzle for scholars, an intellectual game played out in quiet libraries. But every one of those symbol sequences was carved by a human hand for a human reason. Somewhere in Mohenjo-Daro, a craftsman sat in the shade of a mud brick workshop, carving a unicorn-like animal into soft stone. Above it, he pressed in a short line of symbols, a name perhaps, a number, a blessing. We will never know which. A mother may have worn a similar seal on a cord around her neck, an identity marker in a city crowded with strangers. A trader carried one in a satchel as he crossed into a foreign land, his guarantee of honesty in a deal he couldn't otherwise prove. These were people who loved, who feared floods and failed harvests, who buried their dead with care, who built a world meant to outlast them. And in a way, it did. Their bricks are still here. Their drains are still here. Their cities can still be walked, street by street, 4,000 years later. But their voices are gone. This is the true weight of the mystery. It isn't simply that we can't read a dead language. It's that an entire civilization, urban, connected, sophisticated enough to trade across continents, remains essentially mute in the historical record. We can measure their bricks. We can trace their trade routes. We can stand inside their bathhouses. We cannot hear a single word they said. None of this has stopped people from trying. If anything, the silence has only made the obsession stronger. One of the most respected theories comes from the linguist Asko Parpola, who has spent decades arguing that the Indus script encodes an early form of a Dravidian language, the family that today includes Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada, still spoken by hundreds of millions of people across southern India. Under this theory, the builders of Mohenjo-Daro may be the linguistic ancestors of communities that exist right now, thousands of kilometers to the south, their language pushed out of the north by later migrations. Others argue for a connection to early Indo-Aryan languages, the family that eventually produced Sanskrit. This theory carries heavy cultural and political weight, tangled up in unresolved debates over ancient migration into South Asia, and most mainstream researchers treat it with caution given the chronology involved. And some scholars propose something stranger still, that the Indus script may belong to no known language family at all, a linguistic dead end. A voice with no descendants, speaking words that connect to nothing spoken before or after. Every one of these theories has serious scholarship behind it. Every one of them remains unproven. And without new evidence, a longer inscription, a bilingual text, something no one has found in over 100 years of searching, they will likely stay that way. But the mystery of the language is only half the story, because something else remains unexplained. Why did these cities go silent in the first place? By around 1900 BCE, the great cities of the Indus Valley began to empty. Populations shrank. The drainage systems that once made these cities the envy of the ancient world fell into disrepair. Within a few centuries, the sophisticated, interconnected civilization that built Mohenjo-Daro had dissolved into scattered rural settlements. For much of the 20th century,
one explanation dominated: invasion. The theory held that Indo-Aryan warriors swept in from Central Asia and violently destroyed the Harappan world. But archaeologists searched for the evidence, and it never appeared. No mass graves consistent with large-scale warfare, no city-wide layers of ash and destruction. The invasion theory, once treated as fact, has largely collapsed under the weight of missing proof. What replaced it is quieter, and in some ways more unsettling. Climate scientists studying ancient monsoon records have found evidence that seasonal rains weakened significantly across the region during this period, a slow environmental shift that would have crippled the agriculture feeding these cities. Some researchers point to the drying of a major river system, one that may have sustained a significant number of Harappan settlements, gradually turning fertile land into desert. There was no single battle, no single dramatic collapse, just a slow unraveling. Harvests failing a little more each year, trade routes fraying, families packing up and leaving for smaller villages better suited to a changing world, until one day, the last city street fell quiet for good. And somewhere in that decline, the tradition of carving those symbols simply stopped. No one recorded the last inscription as the last one. No scribe knew, as he pressed his tool into the clay, that he was writing something no living person would ever fully understand again. The language didn't die in a single moment. It just faded until it was gone. You might expect that a mystery this old would have quietly slipped out of relevance. It hasn't. If anything, the race to solve it has never been more intense.
In recent years, researchers have turned to artificial intelligence and computational modeling, feeding the entire known collection of Indus inscriptions into pattern recognition systems, searching for hidden grammar, recurring structures, statistical fingerprints of language. These methods have offered tantalizing clues, reinforcing the case that these symbols follow rule-based patterns consistent with real language. But pattern is not meaning. A machine can tell you the symbols behave like grammar. It cannot tell you what a single word says. In 2019, the government of Tamil Nadu in southern India announced a significant cash prize for anyone who could definitively crack the code, a reflection of just how deep the cultural stakes run, especially for those who see themselves as the modern descendants of this ancient, silent civilization. And the ground itself hasn't finished speaking. New Indus Valley sites are still being uncovered. Every excavation carries the same electric possibility, that somewhere beneath the soil, an inscription is waiting. Longer, richer, more revealing than anything found before. A bilingual text, an administrative archive, something that could at last hand us the key. So far, the earth has kept its secret. There is something almost humbling about this. We live in an age when artificial intelligence can translate dozens of living languages in seconds, when satellites can map ancient riverbeds from orbit, when scientists can pull DNA from a 4,000-year-old skeleton and reconstruct its owner's ancestry with startling precision. And still, a few thousand small carved symbols have defeated every method modern science has thrown at them. It's a reminder that history doesn't always yield to effort. Sometimes, the past simply withholds itself. A civilization can build cities more advanced than their neighbors, connect trade routes across 1,000 miles, standardize their weights with mathematical precision, and still vanish so completely
that we don't even know what they called themselves. Harappan, Indus Valley Civilization. These are our names for them, not theirs. We don't know what they called their gods, their cities, their own rivers. They left behind bricks that have outlasted empires, engineering that wouldn't be equaled for 2,000 years, a trade network that stretched to the edge of the known world. But they did not leave behind their voice. Every symbol on every seal is a sentence we cannot read, a name we will never pronounce, a story that may never be told, unless somewhere beneath the dust of the Indus Valley, still waiting after 40 centuries of silence, the answer is still there.
Until that day comes, the people who built one of history's greatest civilizations remain exactly as they've been since their last city emptied, visible in stone and unheard in language. And the question that has haunted linguists for over a century remains exactly where it began. What were they trying to tell us?